My name's Bonowitz with Death Penalty Action, and we're going to move on with our program now. It is the international, well, we're calling this today, it's the State of Injustice, the International Human Rights Day Death Penalty Convocation or Forum. And our next panel, we've heard some really powerful stuff, and really the next thing is about what do we do with it in large part. We've got leaders in various organizations that take us to action, that help us put our faith into action, that help us put whatever has moved us and do something more with it to create the change that we want to see. That's the challenge before us. That's the opportunity. And the good news with regard to our issue is that we're actually winning. The death penalty, and when we get to watch the live feed with the recording in a couple of days, sadly, after the last execution that's scheduled for the year, it's looking likely that that's going to happen in Texas on the 11th. By the way, sign the petition for Travis Reynolds on deathpenaltyaction.org, and we'll get that to the governor in Texas as soon as possible. But that's scheduled for Wednesday. And then what happens each year is the Death Penalty Information Center gives us a review of the statistics of what's happening. And what we have seen for now several years running is the lowest numbers of executions in over 20 years. And not only that, but also the lowest numbers of new death sentences in over 20 years. And not only that, but the lowest numbers even of capital indictments. Shane just shared with us the fact that public opinion, we didn't even talk about the new Gallup poll that just came out a couple weeks ago that shows that public opinion in favor of the death penalty is at its lowest level in 40 years, particularly when you offer the opportunity of, life without parole is what they call it. I prefer to call that death in prison or death by incarceration. It's not getting off, right? It's awful. And that's a very severe punishment that the vast majority of people convicted of murder get. But when you let people know that that's there, then what you have is the greatest level of support for ending the death penalty that we've seen in 40 years. Okay? That's the path that we're on. This year, one of the other things we'll be hearing a reminder about is that another state abolished the death penalty. So that makes New Jersey, New Mexico, Illinois, Connecticut, Maryland, Nebraska, and now this year New Hampshire have legislatively repealed the death penalty. Now I have to make sure you know that in Nebraska, where more Republicans voted to end the death penalty than Democrats did, because there's not very many Democrats in the legislature in Nebraska, but they not only passed the bill to repeal the death penalty, and the governor there vetoed that bill, they overrode the veto and abolished the death penalty. And then Governor Ricketts used his own money to put a referendum on the ballot, and in putting it to a vote of the people in Nebraska, they overturned that and brought back the death penalty. And they then managed to carry out one execution of a man who'd been on death row for almost 40 years. Okay, I mean, how ridiculous is that? And but in addition to those states, we've also had the state courts in Washington State most recently, and before that in Delaware, and before that in New York State. These three state Supreme Courts have thrown out the death penalty, leaving us with 29 states that still have it on the books. Okay, 21 states have abandoned capital punishment. And I think it's also important to point out that not everybody had it. 12 states never had the death penalty in the current era, so they didn't have to do anything to end it, except that they still sort of have the death penalty, because here we are in a moment where tomorrow, had not the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the injunction, we would have seen the federal death penalty, federal executions resume. And of course, federal executions are everywhere. So even if you're a state that has legislatively repealed the death penalty, you still have a federal death penalty there. And that's just something there to be aware of. But all of this All of these successes, whether it's setting up the environment for a court to act or actually getting a legislature to pass a repeal bill, these things don't just happen. They happen because of the work of the people we're about to hear from. The people that are in the streets, that are in the neighborhoods, that are in the churches, that are mobilizing people. And as Shane said, we don't have to change anybody's mind. We just have to find the people that agree with us and get them to do something. That's really what we have to do, and that's what our movement's all about. And that's the challenge before us. So I want to ask each one of our panelists, with the exception of George, to share a little bit about what their organizations do. And actually, why don't we start with George? And because George is up here as he's been a part of a number of campaigns. I've been able to go to a number of legislatures together with George, but he's bringing us a unique message. And then right at 4 o'clock, we're going to have a special presentation that's impromptu for a moment. And then after that, we'll get back to our other 3 panelists. We'll hear what they have to say, and we'll have some dialogue about the work. So, George, Kain.
Thank you, Abe. The first round of applause goes to this man right over here, Abe Bonowitz, for the work that he's done. Well, like Shane, I got up at 3 o'clock this morning to catch a 7 o'clock flight. And I had to charge my hearing aids in the back room because they're only good for about 9 or 10 hours. So I'm good to go. Unlike Chris, however, you won't have a problem hearing me. The microphone, I'll make sure. I want to start by saying something that I've come to learn in my 62 years of life. Well, now you know how old I am. God hears the cry of the poor. God hears the cry of the poor. And I'm convinced that God is in this room today, doing the work that needs to be done. And he's listening to you, and he's listening to me. And he's listening to everybody who is being treated unjustly and unfairly, because he is a God of the poor. It's a miracle that I'm here today. And I'm very humbled to be a part of what's happening in this movement. Because 30 years ago, I wouldn't have been in this room. Because I was a supporter of capital punishment. I probably should tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a law enforcement officer. I've worked in law enforcement for 35 years. I used to think that the death penalty kept me safe. Now, I won't say that I was an avid, ardent supporter of the death penalty, but it was inconsequential to me that people were killed for killing other people. Which is interesting because it was really a contradiction of my faith. I'm Roman Catholic. And my transition in my faith, my journey to become anti-death penalty didn't happen overnight, because I had to struggle with myself and the things inside myself. And I came to know that the death penalty was wrong. I started teaching college, and I thought I should do some homework to make sure of the classes that I was going to teach. I would make sure that I was on top of everything. When it came to the death penalty, I said, I know everything that needs to be known about the death penalty. It's a good thing to have. And I started doing the research. And I'll shorten this part of it up, but let me tell you, I thought that I worked in a criminal justice system that made sure that it crossed every T and dotted every I, especially when it came to sentences of death. And what I learned horrified me. And Justice Thurgood Marshall pointed that out very early in 1972 in Furman versus Georgia, when he talked about the things that were wrong with the death penalty before we ever knew how wrong they were. Back then, they called him a fool. Today, he's being called a prophet. Because we know, as he said, that innocent people have been sentenced to death. We know that the death penalty is racially disparate. We know that it's caused havoc in the entire criminal justice system. Listen to what we heard in this room today. The trauma of the death penalty is real. The death penalty takes no prisoners. All of us die when we have a death penalty. All of us, because we're all in this. My journey as a law enforcement officer, it's been a long time. And I speak to law enforcement officers all over the country. Well, all over the world, actually. I've been very blessed in my life to have gone to many different countries. I just got back from Rome a couple of weeks ago. No, last week. It feels like a couple of weeks ago. But it's difficult because we're a tough group to break through to, because I, like my brothers at the time, felt we needed to have a death penalty. I know now it doesn't work. I've seen the collateral consequences of the death penalty. I've heard the stories in this room today. And I was with Rodney and Chris and a bunch of other people in this room in Ohio a couple of months ago. We need to do something different. Part of my journey in this death penalty thing has led me to a deeper faith. And a couple of years ago, I made the decision to become, or to seek to become, a deacon in my church, in the Catholic Church. And I'm in formation right now. In fact, I was with my bishop last night, and he knew I was going to be coming here, and said to me, "Take it easy on us, George." I said, "Sorry, Bishop." We share in the blame. We share in the blame. And thank God Pope Francis has come out and said what he said affirmatively. But that's not new. The Catholic Church being against the death penalty has been talked about for years. But nobody has taken the bull by the horns to go out and talk about it and say it's wrong once and for all. And Pope Francis just did that last year. I want to talk about something that was brought up before, because this is all part of my journey, and I'm sharing myself with you here. I have been sick to my stomach reading again and again and again prosecutors, judges, police say, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life, as using that as a justification for the death penalty. We don't pluck people's eyes out when somebody loses their eye in a fight. We don't knock their teeth out when they punch somebody in the nose and they break their teeth. Why do we take a life for a life? So one of the things I've learned in seminary is when you look at a biblical passage, you've got to look at what comes before the passage, and you've got to look at what comes after the passage. And people that like to pull certain passages out, I used to do that. You got to look at the whole context. And I spent hours and hours and hours in the basement of the library at St. Joseph's Seminary in Yonkers, New York, with a very good priest friend of mine, a theologian in the Old Testament. I said, I got to get to the bottom of this. What does this mean? Or perhaps more appropriately, what does it not mean? And let me tell you what I found. I always knew that there was an Old Testament biblical death penalty. But it was almost never used. And the reason why it was never used is that there were 44 prescriptions and restrictions that needed to be employed to stop the death penalty being used. Now, folks, I don't mean to be veering off into another field here, because this is part of me and part of my journey as a law enforcement officer and what I've come to learn. And here's what I came to learn about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a life for a life. It does not mean support for the death penalty. Some people had written that it was meant to limit revenge, and Sister Helen Prejean was absolutely correct when she wrote and talked about that. But guess what I found? The biblical scholars believe that the best interpretation of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a life for a life is only the value of an eye for an eye, only the value of a tooth for a tooth, only the value of a life for a life. They wanted to make sure that victims were compensated for harm that was done to them. And in cases where it was a life that was taken, it was the responsibility of the unjust aggressor to make sure that the victim's family was compensated and made whole. What do we call that today? Restorative justice. It's so old, it's new. We're starting to crack. We're starting to get to the truth, where the education is starting to get out. Del Resinella, you've heard the name Del Resinella before. Dear friend of mine, Florida's death row, late chaplain. He and I just wrote a chapter in a large encyclopedia regarding the death penalty, just got published, on this very issue. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and a life for life was not meant to be interpreted as retributive. It's meant to be restorative. And that's what we need to be doing today with this whole discussion about the death penalty. Making communities whole, making families whole, making sure that victims get what they need and not be dragged through a system that promises them in the end, the system that I work in, that promises people, you will feel better in the end when the person who killed your loved one is executed. It is a lie. It's a myth. You know it. You've heard it. We have got to do better. And meetings like this, we are doing it today. We are moving forward. You being here today, you making sure that the voices are heard, the stories of Roderick Reed and many others. What a great system that we have, over 166 people that have been exonerated off death row. We've got to do better, and we've got to move on. So I'm going to pass the microphone back to Abe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George. And I want to start down on the other end of the table this time with Stephanie Quiring. And she's going to give us another local voice. Stephanie Quiring is the new chair of the board of directors of the Indiana Abolition Coalition.
Dave, you said that we're doing something at 4 o'clock. Is that right? Because I'm watching the clock. If you need me to.
You keep going, and I'll let you know when we need to interrupt.
Okay. All right. Great to be here with you today. Have thoroughly enjoyed connecting to the energy in the room, the passion, the insight, the pain. As Abe said, I am a recently elected president of the Indiana Abolition Coalition. We are a volunteer organization, literally organized across the state of Indiana to end the death penalty here and beyond. So at the state level and the federal level, and to support the movement both nationally and internationally, okay? So when we are moved, when we are stirred, when we are riled up because of the injustice we're made aware of or reminded of today, and then you say to yourself, so then what's next? At a very base level, I am excited to connect with you today, for you to put a face to your Hoosier movement to end the death penalty. One of the pieces of it. Very selfishly, I am going to put a clipboard in front of your face during our next session so that I can capture your information, and so that as we start looking to 2020 and we are mobilizing across the state, where you are looking to bring resources into your community, or you need folks to come and speak to a group of people that you've organized, or whatever the case may be, that you understand that the Indiana Abolition Coalition is here to support you. And just as we're here to support you, we would really appreciate you being here to support us, right? This beautiful cyclical relationship. One of the other things that we're really excited about going into 2020 as the Indiana Abolition Coalition is to be mobilized and nimble so that we can support and be responsive to other folks doing incredible work. So when there's the Terre, Haute death penalty resistance organization, when it's death penalty action, when it's Mr. Reed and his up-and-coming 501c3 and or the continuation of your work in whatever form it is, that we are Hoosiers mobilized, ready, supporting one another and people well beyond our state's lines. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. So you don't have to wonder, thank you. You don't have to wonder what to do next or oh, that felt really good. It felt really good on a Sunday afternoon to be convicted about the shit going on. Sorry, did that offend? Right, but we're talking about killing people at the hand of the state. So hopefully a little cuss word doesn't send us over the edge, right? All right. Do you see? We're here. Let's engage. Let's connect. Let's make this tangible. Indiana Abolition Coalition has been around since the 90s. It is the direct outgrowth of the Journey of Hope, which is also represented here today. And so we look forward to growing the organization, growing our reach, and really engaging in this work. Now, this threatened resumption of the federal death penalty has breathed some life into work going on here in Terre Haute and beyond. What I also need us to be really aware of is the fact that Indiana at the state level absolutely still has the death penalty. And while it has been relatively quiet, meaning a lack of executions in the last handful of years or so, we should not let that be a reason or an excuse for us to be apathetic, for us to fail to act or to organize. We would like to see mobilization, action, support, and connection amongst our communities across the state to not only support the end of the federal death penalty, but to bring this chapter of the death penalty at the state level in Indiana to a close once and for all. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So thank you. So what I want you to understand is that I'm going to send that clipboard around, that our website, indianaabolition.org, is available to you. My contact information is on that website as well. You reach out to me for anything, okay? I will be there. I myself am stationed in Indianapolis. I'm an attorney in Indianapolis. I'm on faculty at the university, right? Actively engaged in this work for nearly 20 years, both here and across the country. All right? And I just want to affirm a couple things that I think are really important as we think about language. And some of us have stumbled over our words when we go to say criminal justice system and it just doesn't feel right, right? Language matters. How we talk about things matters. And we're in a space where we can begin to shift that narrative, okay? That is false. It is not about justice more often than not. And so as an attorney myself, I use the phrase criminal legal system, right? Criminal legal system. Another important perspective shift that's been offered up, and that's really powerful. And so I want to support and affirm and stand behind Mr. Reed's observation. This system is not broken. It is functioning exactly as it was built, and it will continue to do so unless we move and demand differently, period. And so what's really important for those of us that are able to kind of move through the experience unscathed or less scathed by the system need to really be called to our own introspection and our own action to better understand the ways in which we have contributed, perhaps without malice of intent, right? But merely in the way that we're moving and functioning, we have contributed to the maintenance and the proliferation of this system. Now, going into all of those layers is beyond what we have time for in the next 30 seconds. Okay? But I welcome those dialogues. I welcome dialogues in your community about the death penalty and what abolition looks like. And the Indiana Abolition Coalition is available to you. We are mobile. We will come to your doorstep. You just let us know what you need. We are excited about supporting you, and we are ready to see abolition come to fruition. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce to you now a voice from the federal death row, just a few miles from here. We're going to hear some commentary with Billy Allen, who is a man who claims innocence, but he is on the federal death row, just a few miles from here.
Just going to put it. Hold on 1 second.
Yep.
Go ahead.
There we go. Billy, can you hear me?
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Can you hear that back there? So, Billy, thanks so much for calling in. My name is Abe Bonowitz with a group called Death Penalty Action. And with me are, I'd say, about 60 or 70 people who've come, some from the area and some from all over the country, to be here. And we're all thankful that there's no executions going on. But we're glad to hear your voice. And what would you like to share with us about what's happening there today?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming together, to speak about federal death row, because we really have no voice, and that's why I guess you can say a lot of the injustices we, encounter here haven't really been addressed because we don't have people to really come out and speak about our situation, speak about us. We're just federal death row. We're not a face. We're not people. We're just, our situation. So I thank you all for, finally bringing light to, the things that we are going through and, our situations, because it is, a stressful situation. And, thankfully they didn't, the executions didn't go forward, which most people were really worried about,
What can you tell us a little bit about what it's like on a daily basis there?
Right. I mean, honestly, since the execution started, it's been stressful. I mean, very stressful. I mean, you try to live, as best you can here. You try to make your life as normal as possible in a cell. But when you're facing death, or you're told that, people you got to know over the years are about to be executed, it's just like, someone telling your family member just got cancer, or somebody, your next door neighbor just got cancer. You're wondering, okay, are they going to live? Are they going to die? So it affects you whether you wanted to or not. Indirectly, it's either going to motivate you or it's going to take away from you. And I feel like when they announced that they were going to start executing it took a lot of hope away from people. It made people worry every day. People were, wondering, where's the help? Because a lot of us, even though we're represented by counsel, a lot of our attorneys, we feel like, they could have been more vocal about our situation a lot sooner before things came down, instead of having to wait till the last minute to be addressed. So it's been very stressful amongst people, so this has been a breath of fresh air, but, it's only a stage, so it's only temporary. So it's only a temporary joy.
This call is from a federal prison.
That's helpful to know, Billy. I want to share with you that, especially those of us in our part of the movement, the organizing, policy, protesting part of the movement, we've been really trying to respect what the attorneys have asked us to do, which is not get deep into the cases, but we've been really doing a lot of work to prepare for now, the time when it's time to stand up, and also in the last month or so when they've really been working on the clemency campaigns. So there's a balance, and what I hope you can take back to everybody there is that you're not alone. There are people who love you. There are people who are concerned about you. There are also people who don't care a lick about you, but they don't want to kill you. And
right.
and together, ours is a movement that is working, and I believe that we're going to be able to stop these federal executions. And if you could just share with everybody there that, there's people that are here in Terre Haute that are there to stand with you. And I'll share with you also, is it true that when you go to visitation that you wear maroon-colored uniforms?
They're brown. We wear brown pants and a brown shirt. You have to wear the institutional visiting clothes. And it's just like a brown khaki shirt and brown khaki pants, and you can wear your shoes, but that's about it. I mean, you can take pictures with your family, so I mean that gives a little comfort, that you're able to take pictures, but you're behind a glass, and I've been blessed to have visits from my family, and I think that when you have those visits, because I've seen what not having visit does to people. I mean, you literally have people who don't get visits at all, and you slowly see their minds breaking down, so it's like we need that outside, help and support, or those voices to be heard in here. We see it in the newspapers, but it would help a lot more for the guys who don't get visits, the guys who need to hear, your voices to say, okay, you're not alone. You might not get a visit, but here's a card. Just know we're supporting you. We're there for you. Those little things carry a lot of weight for us in this situation.
Sure. Hey, that's helpful to know. If we could get, somebody that does have a visit, well, actually, Billy, your sister has been in touch with me, and she's really wanted to lift up your case, and we're going to be working with her to do that. But maybe you could get her a list of the people that don't have visits, and we can convey that to the sisters here and to the other folks that are nearby that could come and do visits, and also to the Death Row Support Project, which is happy to build relationships with pen pals. So if you get your sister a list of who needs a visit, and we'll make it happen. Is that cool?
Okay, that'll work. I mean, I don't mind helping. And like I said, when Liliana told me your name, I was like, my sister told me about him. I just talked to her. She is in New York right now, working with Troy Davis, a project they have up there with Troy Davis.
Yeah.
So she's up there, and promoting my case and kind of helping, bring light to the federal death penalty, and she's kind of conveying the same things, I'm saying. And I'll say this, I understand that you all respect our attorneys, the way they want to do things, but at the same time, for me, I feel like for me speaking, I feel like to remain silent is to kind of not put people in the courts or Congress and the Senate aware of what's going on in the system. Because if you have every attorney, that we went to trial with, didn't present evidence, didn't do any investigation, why would you want to keep that silent when that can kind of motivate people to, want to change and make sure that, okay, if you're going to execute somebody, at least make sure they have, proper representation. And a lot of times that doesn't happen, and to not let people know that, I think that it kind of doesn't help us in the court system.
That we get that, and I think things are going to shift a little bit. I want to share with you what your sister is up to right now is a collaborative protest of the federal executions. Also, they're doing a live stage reading of I Am Troy Davis, a book written by Troy and his sister Martina and Jen Marlowe, and they're on stage right now as we speak, having this live stage reading being performed by people who have connections to death row. So people like your sister and death row survivors and other people like that. That's what's happening there. So it's amazing that we've been able to make this connection. Does anybody have a question I should ask? Everybody's just soaking this in because most of us don't get the opportunity. What else can you share before they cut us off?
I mean, I think, like I said, I think it's key for me to. I think you all being connected to us is very, very key. And I don't think I can stress that enough. You all. I feel like it would make you all better advocates. It would make you all be able to find solution or to be able to answer questions because you all connect with the senators, the mayors, and people like that, and to be able to know some of the cases. I think that is important. I understand you're not going to know every case, but a lot of cases share the same problem. So if you can take a consensus and say, okay, well, out of the 60 cases, you have 40 where the attorney didn't investigate this, didn't do that. That can kind of, give you all leverage to make policy changes, to ensure that instead of giving a defense attorney $20,000 where the prosecution gets $200,000 to $500,000, how can you compete with that? And you can show kind of the problems when you don't have those things. And that's kind of why I've been kind of trying to push my case to show, okay, how is it that you can have DNA evidence that has helped exonerate people in the state, but yet when I present my DNA evidence in the federal system, they're telling me it doesn't matter. But then when I show them that my attorney knew about it and didn't present it, they're saying it's my fault because I didn't know the law at the time and didn't press my attorney to do it. So I think that pointing these things out, it would shock most people because we take pride in saying, okay, the United States has the greatest justice system in the world, and we're quick to point out the flaws in other justice systems. But if we pointed out our flaws, we'll see we're almost hand in hand with a lot of the countries we complain about. We just hide ours well because that's why it takes people 30 to 40 years to get exonerated, because we hide those things, because these things are not put in the media when they should be. Because it's always in the media when these people are convicted, but why don't they get the same media attention when they are exonerated? I mean, three guys were just exonerated from Philadelphia. I saw it at the bottom of the screen. I haven't seen it anywhere else, and I'm pretty sure most people don't know about that. And that, to me, is the problem, to not point out that it's always behind ineffective citizen counsel. It would force the senators to, I guess, put more money towards defense. That's what we need. We need more money towards defense. We need more attention, more access to the courts. Because it's crazy. You can have cameras inside the state court, but you can't have them inside the federal courts. Why is that? What are they hiding? Their conviction rate is good, but it's not that good. So that's I think the biggest concern, amongst a lot of us.
I hear you, and we hear you, and we will carry this message out. I do want to share with you what you made me think about when you were talking about the most recent, actually they're not even the most recent anymore, the 3 exonerees in Philadelphia. Now these were not death cases, but I think this is one of the things we've been talking about is the lowest levels of public support for the death penalty in 40 years that we're at right now. And part of that is because, and part of the reason we don't hear about all these exonerations is because they're happening almost every day, certainly every week. And people are waking up to that. But there is so much more that has to shift and so much more that we have to do. Billy, I want to thank you for calling in. I want to give you a second to give us a parting greeting, and then we're going to move on with our program. And can I get everybody to give us a rousing applause? So Billy, please, I hope you can hear that. Take it back to everybody there.
Yeah. I mean, it put a smile on my face, and trust me, I'm going to get, as soon as we get off the phone, I'm going to yell out to everyone and let them know that you all, because at times, don't get me wrong, we know you all out there, and we hear about you all being out there, but to know that you all out there and to be able to somebody to relay that to us, even if it wasn't me, I'd be happy if it was coming from somebody else. So just know that I thank you all, and keep up the fight. I mean, we need you all. I mean, you all might not think you're making big strides, but hope is what we need more than anything, in a situation where there's so much hopelessness. So I thank you all, and I appreciate you all for coming together, and I hope you all continue the fight, and then, do away with the death penalty altogether.
Amazing.
Well, this phone is about to go.
Billy, thank you so much.
I appreciate you.
Hey, listen, thanks so much for calling in. Tell your sister to give me a couple of days to sleep and then give me a call. And we just appreciate you, and just know, like I said, we're here, and we're here to make sure you know you're not alone. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I will share that with everybody. I promise. As soon as this phone hangs up, I'm gonna let everybody know, and I know they're gonna thank you all. So I appreciate.
Up, and there it went. Wow. I'm a little verklempt. It's not every day that we get that opportunity to hear that kind of voice and to be able to be heard back and to know that we've built a connection. So it's pretty amazing. So we've got 2 more speakers on the panel here, and then another speaker by video, and then our closing speaker. We might have a second video. We'll see if it shows up. But I want to ask John, you want to go next, and then Emma, and just pass the mic when you're ready. And thank you both for being here. Both another couple people that got up way too early today.
Thanks, Abe. Appreciate it. Hi, folks. I'm Johnny Zokovitch. I'm the Executive Director of Pax Christi USA. We're the National Catholic Peace and Justice Movement, and we've been working around the death penalty because we see it as a fundamental human rights issue for almost 50 years now. And I'm really excited to be here with y'all today, especially because we're on the eve of December 10th, the International Human Rights Day. So to talk about the death penalty is to talk about the most fundamental of human rights. And there's 3 things that I want to share with you. 3 reasons that we as Pax Christi USA, our local groups, our religious communities, I know there's sisters in the audience today, right? Oh, yeah. All right, sisters are the backbone of the Catholic Peace and Justice Movement. So our local chapters, our religious communities, parishes that are all affiliated with Pax Christi USA have been working on the death penalty for a long time. And there's 3 things that I want to bring up about that work. The first thing is connected to a time when I was part of a Pax Christi group when I was in college. And one of the things that Pax Christi groups are raising about the death penalty is that the application of the death penalty is rooted in our nation's original sin of white supremacy. We have heard that talked about subtly, maybe in context, several times today. It's something that we bring up over and over again in educating our own church, which has also been implicated in white supremacy at many, many levels. So it's important for us to draw that attention that the death penalty is rooted in white supremacy. And when I was a student at the University of Florida, I had a professor there who was a big proponent of the death penalty. And he was a researcher in sociology. He was asked by the Reagan administration to do some studies about the death penalty to come up with more support for why we needed the death penalty. And the thing that he uncovered that was most shocking to him was the factor of race within the death penalty. And it was not the race of the perpetrator, but rather the race of the victim. In Florida, at the time that he was doing this study in the early 90s, if you were a black person who killed a white person, you were 40 times more likely to go to death row than if you were a white person who killed a white person. And if you were a white person who killed a black person, or a black person who killed a black person, you didn't go to death row at all. And that message was that some lives, white lives, mattered more than black lives. So we always want to raise this issue, that the original sin of our country, of white supremacy, is present and active in the application of the death penalty today. And Pax Christi groups are raising that issue. Secondly, for some of you who have not been to death row, I thought it was so fortunate that we've had the speakers today who have family members who are on death row. I visited people on death row. And the folks that I visited, whenever I would go, the thing that moved me the most was the feel of the visiting center at Florida's death row. It was like a Denny's on a Sunday morning. There were young kids there. There were grandparents there. There were people hugging and sharing, and there were little kids running around. When the death row is imposed on a person, it's not just imposed on a person, it's imposed on a family. It disrupts the lives of family members, not just the life of that person that is put on death row. It means little kids whose Saturdays end up on death row instead of at Little League baseball games or basketball games. It means grandparents who, instead of being at church playing bingo or playing cards, are spending their Saturdays or their Sundays on death row. It means children of death row inmates who are carrying around that secret shame all day long in their high schools and spending their time visiting their fathers, typically their fathers, on death row instead of being out on dates, going to prom, stuff like that. It's not only the executed who die on that day. As we've heard from several speakers, it's the family members who have a piece of them die as well. The last thing I wanted to mention is that for people of faith, the death penalty is directly opposed to our understanding of a God who is love, mercy, compassion, and justice. There is no way to get around that. You have to go through all kinds of theological and ethical gymnastics to support the death penalty if you call yourself a person of faith. In the Gospels, we see a nonviolent Jesus who taught and exemplified forgiveness, mercy, compassion, and justice that was restorative and healing. It was always seeking to convert or to correct, not to condemn. In Pax Christi USA's statement on the death penalty, we tied it into the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We wrote, although the U.S. was a key author of the United Nations Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, our nation resists the 1998 UN Human Rights Commission resolution that calls for a moratorium on executions leading to total abolition. The right to life, specifically, is a minimum and basic provision upheld repeatedly in international human rights documents. Legalized execution in the United States undermines these international standards and teaches that violence is an acceptable way of dealing with violence. For us at Pax Christi USA, these are the ways that we are raising up the issue of the death penalty. We are part of an international movement with 120 member organizations in 50 countries, some that are also practicing the death penalty. And we continue to raise it as the fundamental human rights issue of our time. We cannot execute people. We cannot put people to death. It goes against our humanity. It goes against who we are as a human family. And for people of faith, it goes against who we believe God to be. Thank you.
That is going to be a tough act to follow, so I feel like the pressure is off me now. And I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Tacke, and I'm the Associate Director of Community Engagement for Catholic Mobilizing Network. Catholic Mobilizing Network is based in Washington, D.C., and we are the national Catholic organization that works to educate, advocate, and pray for an end to the death penalty and to promote restorative justice. And I will say, every time I'm here at a gathering like this, usually organized by Abe, thank you, Abe, I'm always overwhelmed and so incredibly humbled by the wisdom and the grace and the compassion and the knowledge and the hard truth-telling that I always bear witness to. And I'm so grateful for you all here. So thank you so much for this, this brotherhood, this sisterhood of you all here together. It means a lot to be a part of this with you all. For those of you who are not familiar with Catholic Mobilizing Network, our mission, like I said, is to end the use of the death penalty. So we really want to educate Catholics on what does our Catholic faith say about the death penalty. And like you all here today, we know that the death penalty does not honor the God-given dignity of humans, of human life. And we know the death penalty only perpetuates a cycle of trauma and hate and violence, and not one of restoration and love, which is what we're called to build as people who believe in goodwill and in Christ and in what we're called to be each other's keepers. So I will say, while the fear of the restart of the federal executions may be the impetus for why we're all gathered here today, Catholics and we all here recognize that the federal death penalty is riddled with the same issues found at the state level, including, and it's been said many times here before, and I think it's worth repeating, racial bias, arbitrariness, and innocence. and the targeting of vulnerable and at-risk populations, such as those living in poverty and those who experience severe mental illness, intellectual disability, and brain damage. We are not executing the worst of the worst in our society. But even if we were, and who are we to judge who those may be, we would still be against the death penalty. We would still be against it. It is wrong. It is wrong to execute someone. It is wrong to take a human life. That is not our right as humans. That is not our job. So I think my role here today, and what I can leave you all with, are some action steps. And while we are a Catholic organization, and we work with bishops and state Catholic conferences and secular state campaigns that are working to repeal the death penalty, we have a few action steps I'd like to share with you all here today. The first one is our national Catholic pledge to end the death penalty. You do not have to be Catholic to sign it. It's for Catholics and all people of goodwill who want to see an end to the use of the death penalty. So we're up to a little over 30,000 signatures now since we launched the pledge a couple years ago. Very exciting. So you can we have a stack of these on the table in the next room. You can sign your name saying, you want to see an end to the death penalty. And then that will put you on our email list if you would like. And we'll give you other ways and opportunities and resources to take action against the death penalty. And I think one of the most direct actions you can take through Catholic Mobilizing Network is signing up for the Mercy in Action Project, which is a monthly email that we send out every month with a list of upcoming executions for the next several weeks. And it'll show the names of the person who is scheduled to be executed and what state they're from. You can click on their name and you can send a letter, which is pre-written for you, and you're allowed to personalize it and add whatever kind of detail or flourish you want. And then you just hit submit, and it will go to the governor or the Board of Pardons and Paroles for that state. So that's a really easy, a really direct action you can take to say, I don't want this person executed, not in my name. And we also right now have live on our website at catholicsmobilizing.org a Catholic petition against federal executions. This past Thursday, we delivered this petition with almost 3,000 signatures to Attorney General Barr and President Trump, with Catholics from across the nation saying that they don't want federal executions to restart. And I can just say, going through the thousands of comments on that petition of Catholics saying why they don't want federal executions to restart, not in their name, it was encouraging to see how many comments said, this is a life issue, this issue is so crucial and so important to my faith. I don't want to see executions restarted in my name. And I think that's a message that we at Catholic Mobilizing Network, we in this room, can carry across in our work to say, not in our name. Not today, not ever. We want to see executions happen, or continue to happen. So with that, I will leave it there, Abe. Oh, and I do want to share our sticker, my favorite resource, which says, who would Jesus execute? And I think we all know the answer to that question. But we have a big stack of these in the other room, which you're welcome to have at it.
Give us a nice smile, everybody.